Hello everyone, and welcome to STW Sports, this live stream where I'm joined by fellow CEU San Pablo student Nelson Walker. Now, people who've watched my channel before might not be too familiar with Nelson, so as I just mentioned, he is a fellow CEU San Pablo student, studies in Sheffield in the United Kingdom, University of Sheffield. Nelson is a Liverpool fan for his at club level, I guess you can say, and of course, going into the World Cup, just like myself, we will both be supporting England despite both living in Spain at the moment. But it's going to set to say, Nelson, we obviously had a good discussion about it today, didn't we? The World Cup, and obviously you had your comments on my questionable predictions in some of the groups. But
yeah, they were a bit bold, some of your predictions.
Yeah, and I think, going into the World Cup, I mean, the hype around this World Cup, it's fair to say, has been very, very slim. I think we all expected that, obviously, with the circumstances, with where it's taking place and everything. But I actually think this is going to be I'm actually now quite excited for the tournament, seeing the teams that are in. Now I've done my research on all the teams as well. It's made me really excited for the 2022 World Cup. And obviously, soon as this ends, we've got the Premier League and club football returning as well. So it's going to be all go for football really until the summer. It's going to be a crazy schedule. But how are you feeling, Nelson, about this World Cup? What are your thoughts going into it?
Yeah, I'm feeling excited. I mean, obviously beyond the stadiums, there are a lot of question marks surrounding the tournament, and certainly there have been over the last 2 weeks. A huge amount of gestures and noise surrounding the issues going into the tournament. So it is important to note and to let people know that there are a lot of sort of ethical issues and problems that do surround this World Cup. It's very strange that it is taking place in Qatar. Yet nonetheless, I am a football fan and I'm looking forward to it. And after 4 years, it's just fantastic to have it back. And as strange as it's going to feel to have it in winter, in the Middle East with all its problems, I'm sure when the footballs get started, we can still try and enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think, as you say, this tournament was confirmed all the way back in 2009, a very long time ago, to be honest. So I think, they've had a lot of time to prepare. And as you say, there's been some rather questionable decisions in terms of, obviously the tournament taking place in Qatar or the questionable decision in itself. But I think with the stadiums that have been built, as you say, it's been kind of a bit of what's happened has been a bit disappointing to hear, to be honest. But but I think in terms of the World Cup, though, it is honestly so exciting, though, going into a World Cup. It's only a few days away now. The opening game isn't exactly one that's going to get every neutral interested, of course, Qatar versus Ecuador. But I think Ecuador are actually quite an underrated team going into this tournament, personally. So I think they could spring a few surprises. I mean, I've looked through Qatar's team, and despite doing the research, I mean, I still can't really think of a player who I really know much about and who could do well at this tournament. But when you're the host nation and when you've got, that support behind you, it could be an advantage for Qatar. But I mean, going into this game, Nelson, obviously it's a bit of a random game to kick off the tournament. But, what are your thoughts going into it? Do you feel like Ecuador, obviously, most people think will have the advantage, but do you think Qatar's home advantage could play a part?
I think normally when you're starting a tournament as the host nation, that's obviously going to have a massive boost. But I think from Qatar's point of view, obviously hosting it, not necessarily having to go through qualifying, all the issues sort of surrounding the tournament. Qatar's not steeped in a lot of football folklore and history, so I'm not so sure. I mean, normally you'd give the home nation the advantage, but I think a comfortable Ecuador win it would be my prediction on this one. I'm thinking more on the lines of a 4-0. I think there could be maybe a couple of chances for Qatar maybe in the opening 20 minutes, and yes, they might nick a goal, but I'm expecting a comfortable Ecuador win, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm the same, to be honest. I mean, yeah, host nations, obviously, we had Russia a few years ago playing Saudi Arabia, didn't we, in 2018? And obviously, Russia won the game 5-0. But I actually think Saudi Arabia didn't play very badly at times in that game, especially in the opening 10 minutes. But sooner as Russia get the goal, it kind of changed the game, really. And obviously, Russia surprised a lot of us in 2018, I think, with how obviously getting to the quarterfinal and taking Croatia all the way to penalties and even beating Spain in the last 16 as well, which was a huge shock. But at the same time, though, I think, Russia definitely had a better team than what Qatar do. So, obviously with host nation, though, does come pressure. I don't think there's much pressure on Qatar personally. I mean, obviously, like you go back to 2014 with Brazil, they had a lot of pressure on them. But I think hosts such as South Africa and obviously Russia didn't really have that pressure because obviously for them, it's a little bit like a free hit. and an opportunity for their fans to really enjoy the ride. But I'm interested in what the Qatari fans are actually like, to be honest. I want to know, I want to see if they're going to be really invested or what this atmospheres are going to be like. Obviously, massive stadiums, which doesn't always mean a great atmosphere. If anything, a big stadium means that the atmosphere is probably not going to be as good. And obviously, so I think that one's going to actually be interesting to see. But obviously, as well, obviously, you've got to talk about England, Nelson. I think after moving away from Qatar, England, I mean, not a lot of hype going into this tournament, unfortunately, despite, a fourth place finish in 2018. And of course, getting to the final, sorry, of the Euros last year. Yeah, I mean, it's England, though, not a lot of hype. And obviously, the squad have now arrived in Qatar. Do you see any hope for England?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been quite low key, as you mentioned, Sam. I mean, going into this tournament on the back of having reached the Euro final, obviously last year, and the semi-finals, and just tragically sort of losing out to Croatia in the semi-finals. Naturally, you'd think England would have a big chance of going a bit further in this tournament, but it's been quite dispiriting, I would say, since the Euros, and I don't think the team has really kicked on. But what I would say in England's favour is the fact that when England have got into those big tournaments over the last couple of times, the World Cup and the Euros, there's been such a fantastic spirit in the squad. And as difficult as maybe the last year has been internationally, for example, that 4-0 defeat to Hungary was quite a low point in the Nations League. I think England could pull it together a little bit. So I give England a decent chance, but I'm not as confident going into it as perhaps I would have been post the Euros, even after the defeat to Italy, because I thought England were magnificent in that tournament. So yeah, they've not really kicked on in that regard, but you can never count us out.
Yeah, I agree. I think that obviously a lot of pressure on Gareth Southgate. But I also think as well with that pressure, I kind of feel sorry for Southgate in a way because I feel like at this point, no matter what he does, I mean, if we beat Iran in the opening game, a lot of people can say it's only Iran. And then you look at our group and a lot of people are expecting us to get out of the group and win it quite easily. So I feel like no matter what Southgate does, it's hard for him to get any praise unless we go on and beat like a Brazil or an Argentina. Then I do think he'll obviously get praise for that. And someone made a really good point recently actually about people criticising Southgate's style of football, but when you actually look at it, not many teams really win tournaments playing amazing football. I mean,
No, you're
Spain
exactly
back in
right.
2010, Spain were one of the best teams I've ever seen back in 2010. They won most of their games 1-0, and it wasn't convincing wins either. It was very quite dull games, especially the final against Holland. That was a game I remember watching, and it certainly wasn't a classic. Obviously, a World Cup final is a World Cup final, so it's going to be interesting, but I think it certainly wasn't a classic on the pitch. But I think, I feel sorry for Southgate in that regard that, yes, England don't play the best football, but are people a little bit harsh on Southgate, do you think? Do you think that he's actually, the style of football doesn't always matter, but we have got so much attacking talent in our team that maybe he's not really the man to get the best out of such a talented group of players?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I'm sort of in the middle because I think when you look on paper at what he's achieved, the World Cup semi-finals, obviously just losing out on that bronze medal at the last World Cup, if that's right, yeah, and then obviously at the Euros, sadly losing on penalties to Italy. I mean, on paper, as much as that's not winning a tournament, that's fantastic from where England were beforehand and sort of the dark days of, Sam Allardyce's stint and, Roy Hodgson might have, he got us through qualifying, but it was never brilliant to watch the football, I would say. So on paper, I think he's done a fantastic job, but you're looking now with the talent across most positions, across the whole squad, really, you're thinking, this really is a time England can and possibly should go on and win a trophy. And given the fact the team seems to have gone backwards a little bit, hasn't gone forwards certainly since the Euros, yeah, I think it rightfully question marks are being laid at Gareth Southgate. Is he getting the best out of this team? And I think over the last year, that's probably been a bit questionable, to be honest. So a lot will tell at this tournament. And if England don't go beyond the quarterfinals or don't quite reach the heights of the Euros or even the World Cup, I think perhaps it might be right for England to look for a new manager to try and really get the best out of this group of players. And because there are many special players in this team, and we want to make the most of them while they're young, while they're at the right age group, and not make the same mistakes that were made years ago under the era of Sven-Göran Eriksson and Fabio Capello.
Yes, I think that actually brings me to what was going to be my next point about England over the years. And obviously, I've grew up as an England fan, and I remember the first tournament I ever watched was Euro 2004 as an 8-year-old. And I mean, the talent England had in Euro 2004 and the 2006 World Cup was just frightening. I mean, the group of players we had have all gone on to be some of the greatest Premier League players ever. I mean, you go through, the only thing we really lacked in that team was an amazing goalkeeper. I think the likes of Paul Robinson and David James were good goalkeepers, but I don't think they were, at the level of the outfield players when you had like Rio Ferdinand, John Terry, Sol Campbell even at the back as well, Ashley Cole at left back, Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Paul Scholes, Rooney, Owen. I mean, Beckham, the list just goes on and on, really, of players England had. I think, obviously I've watched quite a lot over the years of interviews with the players from that team, and they mainly put it down to club rivalries, which was a big reason why that England team didn't go on and achieve a lot. And obviously, a lot of people point the finger at Sven-Göran Eriksson, saying he wasn't the right man. Obviously, he wasn't English, so maybe his passion wasn't really there. However, I think at the same time, you've got to look at Spain, and I mentioned them already, Barcelona, Real Madrid players. That's one of the biggest rivalries in world football, particularly at club level. And those players managed to coexist all the time. I mean, obviously,
Yeah, they all came together in that tournament.
Sergio Ramos and Gerard Piqué always having a massive rivalry with Real Madrid and Barcelona. But when it comes to the national team, they always put the differences aside. So do you think that's something that, England possibly failed to do in that team, I mean, as in that group of players? And let's not forget, England criminally didn't even qualify for Euro 2008. that was the end of our golden generation, many people say. And it did not even qualify for a tournament. I think that kind of epitomises just how much that England team really underachieved. So I think when you look at how much that team underachieved and where this team's got to in tournaments, you've got to be quite grateful as an England fan, surely.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, I remember I read Steven Gerrard's autobiography many, many years ago, and he was saying the exact same thing about the England team in his days, or certainly the days of Sven-Göran Eriksson and Fabio Capello. They just couldn't overcome those club rivalries. How big the Liverpool-Man United rivalry was in the sort of 2008, 2009, and even between, the Chelsea players and Man United players and Arsenal as well. So it was a big challenge, and those managers just obviously couldn't bring the players together. And yet Gareth Southgate has done a fantastic job doing that, because I remember I think in 2018 or even 2019, I think after Liverpool had beaten Tottenham in the Champions League final, and there wasn't too long until there was an international break. He did so well, I think, to bring all the Liverpool and Tottenham players together, because obviously Liverpool players were triumphant, were jubilant, and yet the Tottenham players would have been crestfallen after that final. So I think that spoke a lot about his sort of man management skills and bringing the players together. And you can't question that. That's one of his big successes, I think, changing the culture, transforming the culture again to a positive one at England. And you just hope it can reap its rewards and bring a trophy. But that's obviously eluded England over the last couple of tournaments. But from that culture side of view, I mean, Southgate's been absolutely exceptional, to be honest, and that must be recognised.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there. I mean, obviously, I mentioned the days of Sven-Göran Eriksson, obviously, maybe underachieving. I think Fabio Capello kind of took over in the tail end of the golden generation, really. So by the time Capello took over, obviously his first tournament and only tournament was the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. And at that point, you could really tell that, I mean, we still had the likes of Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard very much top of their game, but a lot of players weren't really at that level anymore. I think Beckham had retired at that point near enough or wasn't playing as regularly. And obviously Rooney was a great player back then, but his tournament record for England never really got going. I think with England, obviously, I think the 2010 World Cup was one to forget. I mean, worst tournament. I'd probably put that lower than, I know going out to Germany, there's no shame in that, but the games against Algeria and the USA, I'll never forget.
I mean, it was the first tournament I really got into, the first international tournament. As awful as it was for England, it was actually the international tournament that really sparked my love for football, I would say.
Oh yeah, I remember the games and the collapse against Germany. Albeit, if Lampard's goal had counted as it should have, that could have changed the game. But I still think Germany had far too much on that day. However, that's all in the past now. That's 12 years ago, and obviously England did get the win over Germany in the Euros last year. So that was a
little bit of revenge last year.
That was a good feeling for all of us English people as well, I think. I mean, I remember going into that game with little confidence, to be honest, because I know it was at Wembley, but Germany have such a good record against England. And yes, Germany aren't as good as what they were. We know that. But obviously, after Germany's, poor World Cup in 2018, you never knew how they were going to respond at the Euro. I certainly didn't know how they were going to respond. I was kind of thinking, and they only just got through the group. Let's not forget they were lucky. They went 2-1 down against Hungary. So, they only just got something out of that. So really, I think they were quite fortunate. But I mean, that was a great one for England. But I think this tournament, though, going back to the times now, of course, it's massive for England because I think with Southgate, I think the only thing that can be deemed a success is a win because obviously last two tournaments, semi-final, final. For me, this is a good chance for England. Yes, there's good teams in our way, but on England's day, I don't see why we can't beat anyone. I really don't see
No,
why
I
England
completely
can't
agree.
beat any team, and that includes the likes of Brazil and Argentina. If England get it right on a day, England can beat absolutely anyone, and I think that's what we've got to do in this tournament. We've got to get it right on the days that we play.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of tournament football because I'm not expecting any fireworks in the group stages as much as on paper it looks like quite a straightforward group for England, but fingers crossed England can get through to the knockout stages without any problems. And then when you get into the knockout stage, it's just a case of managing your games and getting through. It doesn't have to be pretty, as we've said before. A lot of, like we say, even, France's performances in the 2018 World Cup and in the knockout stages, maybe aside from that spectacular 4-3 against Argentina, weren't magnificent or spectacular. And even England's sort of in the knockout stages of the Euros weren't, I wouldn't say absolutely brilliant in the knockout stages, but they just found a way to win. And that's what tournament football requires. So if England can get it together, build a little bit of momentum in the group stages, there's no reason to suggest why England can't go far in this tournament again. And I completely agree. On their day, England are a match for any side in the world, whether that's a South American nation, whether that's anyone anywhere across Europe. I think England can do that, but it's just building that confidence again in the team, which I think has faded a little bit over the past year following the Euros.
I agree. Well, Nelson, I think that, talking about England, we should maybe for the game against Iran. The game against Iran is in 6 days' time. So it's a big game. It's a game a lot of people are expecting England to win. But let's not forget, last tournament in 2020, England opened up against Tunisia. A lot of people, again, were expecting a pretty routine England win. England did win, but it wasn't easy. We won in the last minute thanks to Harry Kane. But I think, obviously, without going too much into detail of what's going on in Iran currently, I think that will be a distraction for the Iranian nation. However, I do think England can't be complacent because if England don't beat Iran, then they're going to have to beat the US and Wales, and they're going to be much harder games on paper than Iran. So England notoriously don't start tournaments too well. Obviously, we have won each of our last two tournaments. We've won our opening game, of course, 2018, 2-1 win against Tunisia, and the Euros as a 1-0 win against Croatia. But I think England cannot take anyone for granted. So
you want to start with a win. It's important to set the tone for the tournament.
Yeah, the start 11 for me has got to be attacking. I don't think Southgate can really afford. He's probably going to play.
But is that his style? Is that Gareth's style?
Yeah, I think he's going to probably start 3 at the back, which is fine. But we need to go for it. Iran are going to sit very deep. We know that Iran are going to try their best to sit very deep and frustrate England and try and take the chance when they get one. So in terms of goalkeeper in that game, goalkeeper's actually not as easy as what people might think. But for me, it's going to be Jordan Pickford. I think Pickford's always been excellent for England in tournaments, and he's actually in really good form for Everton, despite Everton's not so good form. I think Pickford's actually had a really good end to last season. I think he's actually started this season really well as well. So as much as I do like Nick Pope and Aaron Ramsdale, got 3 good goalkeepers to choose from, I personally would still go with Pickford.
Yep. I think I agree with you there. I think Pickford's proven himself time and time again during the tournaments, and he was really exceptional at the last Euros. You think of his penalty saves, obviously against Italy. Admittedly, it was they were in vain, but I think he's proven himself so many times to England that he's got to be in there. He's got Gareth's trust, and as much as I'm a big fan of Nick Pope. I think he's perhaps England's best shot stopper when it comes to just out and out outstanding shot saving. But I think Pickford has perhaps that bigger package that Southgate wants. So yeah, Pickford's my number 1.
Yeah, I think he's going to go 3 centre-backs. So I think this is quite tough to choose, actually, from an England point of view, because we're not really too sure if Kyle Walker's going to be fit at the moment. But if Kyle Walker is fit, I would play Kyle Walker at centre-back. For me, it's so tough with him not taking Tomori. I feel like there's a big selection headache in there. I mean, obviously,
There
there
is.
must be something he doesn't see in Tomori, but I would go Kyle Walker at right centre back because he always seems to play there, and he always does a pretty good job for England there as well. I think the fact he's taken Connor Cody for me is an interesting one. I don't know what you make of that, but I
Yeah.
do like Connor Cody, but I think that there was probably better options. However, from what I've heard, Wolves loaned him out due to the fact they didn't think he was playing a back two. However, well, two centre backs. However, it turns out Everton have been playing that, and he's actually playing really well. So,
Yeah.
really, that hasn't really worked from a Wolves point of view.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
But,
I'm a fan of Connor Cody. I really like him, and I think he's really gained. He's another player like Pickford who's really gained Gareth's trust and confidence. And I think it's not just, well, he's not necessarily going to play all the games. I think he played a very bit part role in the Euros. He didn't play many minutes at all. If I'm not even sure whether he did play any minutes, but I think he's really vocal in the dressing room. So he's a great leader to have, and I think he's probably a good pick from that point of view. And he's been playing regularly for Everton, so I don't see it as a bad decision. I don't expect him to start, but I think he'll be a good voice to have in the dressing room and a good player in the team.
So looking at the defenders, then I think I'm probably going to go with Walker, John Stones, and the final spot's really difficult to choose. But I'm actually going to say Harry Maguire is going to start. I mean, I'm not saying I want that to happen. However, personally, I think if you're looking at form, Harry Maguire does not deserve to be at this tournament. However, he was very good in the Euros and at the last World Cup. So maybe Southgate's looking at it and saying, I mean, obviously Southgate's thing is I'm picking players on form. He said about Tammy Abraham, the reason he's not going is because his form's dipped. However, when you look at that comment, it kind of doesn't look great when he's picked likes of Maguire and Shaw to go.
Yeah,
So
it doesn't
it's
really
a little
stack
bit.
up, does it?
But I mean, I really fear for Maguire. If he plays and makes an error, I really feel like the
Yeah,
internet's
he's in a
going to
difficult
go.
position. Well, he's put himself in a difficult position, Gareth. But I think
Yeah,
again, he loves Maguire. Maguire's got his trust. So if they're all fit, I'm expecting the same sort of back three we've had for the last two tournaments: Maguire, Stones, and Walker. I can't see that
yeah.
changing. And if there is an injury, I wouldn't be surprised if Eric Dyer comes in there because I think he's done very well generally for Tottenham. I know he made a mistake letting in Salah for Liverpool's second goal in the win recently. But I think Eric Dyer is more than capable of playing in that back three as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that three. Right wing back. I mean, I'm a big fan of Trent Alexander-Arnold, despite the criticism he's came under this season. And obviously, last season, ending the season, the Champions League final, obviously, maybe falling asleep at the back post, letting Vinicius Jr. score. I still think Trent's a fantastic right wing back, but with Kieran Trippier's form this season, you've got to play Kieran Trippier, surely. I mean, he's probably been up there for Newcastle's best player this season. So he's probably been the best right back in the league this season. So for me, I'm going to have to go with Kieran. I'm going to have to go Kieran Trippier at right wing back. But if he has a bit of a shaky start to the tournament, he could possibly bring in Trent.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously, you mentioned in the beginning, but I'm obviously a massive Liverpool fan, have been for a while. So naturally, I'm a huge fan of Trent Alexander-Arnold and what he can bring to the team. And his attacking qualities are, no one has ever doubted those, but it's always been the defensive side that's raised a few questions. And I think, like you say, the confidence and form Trippier's playing with, not to mention the fact Gareth Southgate absolutely loves him. He's been quite a stalwart and he was such a versatile player at the last Euros as well. I remember him playing sort of left wing back, I think he might have been against Germany, or maybe it was the first game against Croatia. So I think, yeah, he's going to get Trippier in there somewhere. And I think on form, he merits it as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think Trippier, left wing back, I mean, we're very short of left back options. That's the problem. For me, you're probably going to have to go with Luke Shaw. I don't think Luke Shaw's been in great form for Manchester United for a long time. I think since the last Euros, I think the problem England have got is so many of that squad have dipped form because, maybe not because of the way we lost the final, that might be a bit too far, but I think that so many of them England players since that final haven't been the same in the Premier League. And I think Luke Shaw's definitely probably the prime example because Luke Shaw was fantastic in the Euros. I mean, obviously the assist against Germany got for Sterling, the goal against Italy in the final, the way he took that. I mean, it was generally thinking Luke Shaw, and he ended that season really well for Manchester United as well. So you're thinking Shaw's finally turning into that left back that Man United hoped they signed years ago. But I mean, last season for Manchester United, he was so poor. And I think this season he's not done much when he's played either. But I do think with the injury to Ben Chilwell, I generally think Luke Shaw is our only option at wing back, unless he plays Trippier left wing back and Trent right wing back. But I don't think he's going to do that, Southgate. I think it doesn't really make sense to have someone like Trippier cutting back onto his right foot. You may as well play Shaw there. But for me, I think if Chilwell was fit, I'd have started Chilwell. But I'm going to have to go with Luke Shaw because left back's an area where we're certainly not blessed like we are at right back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree, and I think at the last tournament, Luke Shaw, certainly for me, was probably alongside Sterling and maybe Calvin Phillips and possibly Declan Rice as well as England's sort of 3-4 best players in the tournament. I was so impressed with him, and not to mention his goal against Italy in the final. It's a shame it didn't lead to anything bigger, but yeah, he's been obviously had his injury problems this season. He struggled to get in the United team with their new Dutch left back. So yeah, and like you say, Chilwell is injured. There is the possibility of moving Trippier over to left, but again, I think Luke Shaw is one of those players who's got Southgate's trust, and he's going to put him in there. So I can't see anyone taking that place off him for now. And yeah, Shaw at left wing back for me.
Yeah, and then we move into the midfield. For me, the midfield too, I think most people can predict the mid, providing they're both fit. For me, it's Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham. I don't really think there's many questions asked about that. Obviously, Calvin Phillips had a fantastic tournament in the Euros, but we can't really ignore the fact he was injured pretty much all of last season for Leeds. And of course, he's gone to Man City and he's barely played. I think, again, Southgate's taken Phillips for the reason he was so good in the last Euros. And I think Phillips did play a game or two for Man City just before he picked the squad. I think Phillips is very lucky to be going, personally. I think Phillips...
Yep, I agree.
I think, obviously, the Euros being recently, I think if the Euros was 2 years ago, like it was meant to be in 2020 in the summer, obviously Phillips would have only just got promoted from the Championship with Leeds. So, really, Phillips is quite fortunate that the Euros was a year later because he had that great lockdown season with Leeds. And then, obviously... Since then, it's not really gone his way due to injuries and obviously moving to Man City and in not playing many games. But I see why he's gone. But for me, Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham pretty much can be England's midfield for years to come. I think that's a fantastic midfield. They really look like they play well together from what I've seen as well. I think that's an obvious choice, really, of midfield too.
Yep. Again, I'm completely in the same boat. I completely agree with you. I think, yeah, Calvin Phillips was absolutely outstanding in the last Euros, but he was, like you say, he was injured so much with Leeds last season, and he was just sort of getting going a little bit with Man City. Obviously, it's going to be hard to displace the Rodri in that midfield at Manchester City. So obviously the injury set him back, and he's only just managed to get back from it. So yeah, I agree. He's fortunate to find himself in the squad, and the fact the Euros, yes, was only a year ago has certainly helped him. But yeah, in terms of that two in midfield, that partnership, it's got to be Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham. Bellingham's been absolutely outstanding for Dortmund. It's just unbelievable the experience and quality he plays with for such a young player. The maturity he shows technically, physically, mentally. I think he's got the whole package. And then you put him next to Declan Rice, who is obviously quite combative. He steps in, he wins the ball. I think there's a beautiful sort of chemistry between those two. And yeah, that could well be England's long-term midfield partnership. So if that starts well in the tournament, I can't see that changing at all.
And then we've left with 3 players to choose. Now, this is very... Obviously, Harry Kane pretty much chooses himself if he's fit, so that's not going to be our striker, I assume. The 2 either side of Kane, though, is where it gets tough for me. If Raheem Sterling had started this season well, it would have been a no-brainer. But Sterling, again, in the Euros, I think he was our top goal scorer in the Euros as well. Sterling has such a good tournament. But I don't think he's been very good at all for Chelsea this season, Sterling. I think he started the season really poorly. Yes, it doesn't help that Sterling is playing in a struggling team right now. I don't think that really helps him. It's a tough one for me because I think James Maddison going is brilliant. However, he's got to play.
It was a surprise, wasn't it? I would say.
I mean, I don't know if you've seen England's photo that was actually leaked online, but James Maddison kind of was standing a little bit out the way from everyone else. I don't know if you've seen the photo.
Oh no, I've not seen that actually.
But there's a photo of England. I don't know if you saw a photo years ago of Ashley Cole at Roma where he's kind of
yes.
Yeah, it's very similar to that. Where Maddison's kind of leaning in a little bit.
That's a shame. Feels like a bit of an intruder, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know why it is, to be honest. But
I mean, surprised he probably wasn't expecting to get in the team himself. I mean, given he's not really been picked much at all over the last 2 years, and obviously Leicester haven't started the season well, but obviously he's been playing pretty well. So I think he probably even surprised himself the fact he was picked in the squad. So I'm delighted to see him there because I do think he offers something different. He is slightly different, even to Jack Grealish, maybe share some qualities, but I think Maddison can offer a little bit a little bit different. Maybe can play a little bit more centrally than Grealish can. So yeah, I'm delighted to see him there. And on form, perhaps he even merits to start, but personally, I can't see that happening.
I can't see it happening on the wing. I don't think we should start Maddison on the wings. I think it'll be a bit of a waste of talent. I think if Southgate was to play three in midfield, I would definitely go for Bellingham, Rice, and Maddison. I think Maddison can play more advanced, but I think he's going to go with the two sitting midfielders and the three advanced. So I'm actually going to go with, I think Sterling will start on the left, and I think that because Sterling's Euros, I think that will probably get him the start. The right-hand side for me, though, if it's between Foden and Saka, and I think obviously Saka is tipped for big things at this tournament, and I think Foden is a player you can't really underestimate. I think Foden is obviously still a top player. For me, I'd probably give the edge for Foden to start the first game at least, and then Harry Kane down the middle. But I mean, it's going to be tough, really. I think Southgate's got a couple of selection headaches here and there, but I do think that no matter what team England put out, I do think it'll definitely be good enough to beat Iran. But they've got to work together well. England have to get off to a positive start, as I think the mood will, the mood will just go so poor, and I think Southgate will be under immense pressure. And if we don't beat Iran, then I really think England could struggle to get out of the group. So England have got to start well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as I said before, it's all about setting the tone in tournaments. Even if you get off to perhaps you want a bit more than a scraped sort of win, a 2-0 sort of minimum you'd be looking for from an England point of view. And I think England will win. I'm very confident it will win. It perhaps might not be as spectacular as people would hope, but generally, if you get off to win at a tournament, that sets a nice tone. And I think England will do. And I think in terms of that front three to set up against Iran, I think because Southgate's very much a loyalist in terms of the players who have done very, very well for him, obviously at the Russia World Cup in 2018 and the Euros last year, he tends to pick them. So I'd expect him to be picking Sterling and Saka, to be perfectly honest. But I think on form, I'd rather have Foden and Saka in there, just outside of Harry Kane. I think that would be the perfect front three, maybe to lead England into the tournament. Saka and Foden with their dribbling and creativity. But yes, Sterling's not started the season well. He's obviously had his struggles, even, with Graham Potter coming in and perhaps the change of position, playing more wing back. That doesn't suit him at all. It's a bit strange from Chelsea's point of view. But I would expect Sterling to start. So I think it'd be a Sterling, Saka, perhaps Foden. Either one of Foden or Saka, I think, will accompany Sterling and Kane to start the team. But if it was me, I'd put Foden and Saka alongside Kane.
Yeah, well, I mean, if that's our starting 11, obviously a lot can change, of course, but I feel like no matter what starting 11 we put out, as I say, it should be enough, really. And I just think that it's getting the basics right. I mean, if we can beat Iran in the first game, which obviously is, what most people are predicting, USA game, I think USA have definitely got a better team than what they've had over the years. I think they're actually a better team now than they were back in 2010 when we drew 1-1 with them, of course. But I think England realistically should be taking 7 or 9 points in this group. I'll be very surprised if we don't. I think we'll be very disappointed. However, the Wales game won't be easy, particularly if Wales have to win. I think Wales, obviously, their motivation to beat England will be massive, especially after 2016. Obviously, the way England won in the last minute that game in the Euros. I actually think that was going to be probably our hardest game. But if England are on 6 points by then, it shouldn't really matter too much anyway. England will probably already be through. So I think that's going to be a game that, I'm excited for all the games, of course I am. But from an England point of view, it's all about getting out of the group. And then we obviously play someone from Group A, which is obviously Qatar, Senegal, Netherlands, and Ecuador. So, obviously most people tip in Netherlands and Senegal to get out of the group. So I actually think any of them teams, if it's Qatar, then, that'll be a bonus, I'm sure. But if Qatar have got out of the group, I'll still be quite worried.
It's very unlikely.
They must have done something right to get out of the group in the first place. But, I'm actually thinking Netherlands and Senegal, I wouldn't fear them two teams all that much, to be honest. I think that Netherlands have got a very attacking style of play from what I researched. Obviously an older manager in Van Gaal wasn't really known for his attacking style of play at Manchester United, that's for sure. But it seems like this team is really centred around that. And obviously, it looks like they are going to play the likes of Van Dijk and De Ligt as well, which obviously has the makings of a very good partnership. And they have certainly got a team who can cause problems, Netherlands, for England. No doubt about that if we did play them. And Senegal, a lot depends on Sadio Mane. I mean, with all due respect to Senegal, I don't. If Mane's not fit, I can't really see them doing too well. I think they can get out the group without Mane still because I think they've got quite a favourable group. But I don't think that they're going to. I don't think they're going to go any further without him. So, which team in that group? Maybe not ruling out Qatar, but realistically, would you think England would have the best chance of playing in the last 16?
The best chance. So if England was to win the group, does that mean they'd play the runner-up in the group
Yeah,
of
the runner-up. Yeah,
Netherlands? Okay. I think realistically, it's most likely to be Senegal. To be perfectly
yeah,
honest, I think if Mane was starting, I think there could be. Obviously, he's probably going to miss the first two games. We don't really know the extent of his injury problems that he picked up with Bayern just a week or so ago. I think if he was fit, I think they could really challenge the Netherlands for that top spot. And I've been so impressed with Senegal as a nation, as a footballing team, having won the Africa Cup of Nations, bouncing back from having lost it a few years prior. I think they're an outstanding team when they've got everyone fit. But Mane is there, he's there. He's their fireworks player, and as a Liverpool fan, I loved watching his journey at Liverpool over 6 years. So it was a shame to see him go to Bayern. But yeah, him out of that Senegal team is a big hole for them. They have got Ismail Assar and a few other players who might be able to sort of fill the void a little bit, but you're not going to have quite the same level of fear if you're not seeing Mane on that team sheet. So I think if Senegal finish second, yes, I'd expect England to play Senegal in the last 16, and I think England, on paper at the moment would relish that.
yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I think obviously one thing that's kind of been pointed at Southgate is we've had generous runs to where we've got to in the last. I mean, maybe taking Germany out of the equation in the Euros. We've had favourable draws. I think that is fair to say. However, you can only beat who's in front of you. So I don't really think it's fair for people to say England have had an easy run because we wouldn't be having an easy run if these other teams had, won the game, meant that they're meant to. So
Yeah, that's a very good
I
point.
think England have just done what they're supposed to have done. But obviously, when we have played them in Croatia in 2018, I remember a lot of people were kind of thinking it was going to be a walkover. And I was one of the people who was saying, I don't think it's going to be an easy game. I think Croatia are a very good team. I think they've done very well in this tournament. And obviously, they were pushed all the way by both Denmark and by Russia. So I thought that might be a factor. However, it wasn't that because Croatia looked far fitter than we did in that game, if I remember correctly. And
Yep.
England obviously were the ones who looked knackered despite beating Sweden in 90 minutes in the quarterfinal. So obviously it wasn't quite the way it worked out. But obviously talking about England as well, it's no matter who we play at this tournament, I feel like there's not really the excuse now for England. For me, we've got a good enough team on paper, say, to beat anyone. If we got knocked out by a Brazil or Argentina, you could go, okay, fair enough. Like, they're a very good team. Like when we lost to Brazil in 2002, for example, or when we lost to even Portugal in 2006. I mean, England probably had better players on paper, but I still think Portugal had a very good team back then, the likes of Ronaldo, when he was just starting to break through and become the world star he turned into. Figo, who was getting on, but still a great player. Deco as well. They still had some great players. But I feel like England, even if they come up against one of the big teams, can't really be using the excuse of, oh, we weren't expected to win. I think England have just got to go for it in this tournament and really think to themselves, it's a chance for England. We've done well in the last couple of tournaments. We've got to just go for it, keep the togetherness, and you just never know.
Yeah, I completely agree. Again, I think, having reached the semi-finals of the World Cup in 2018 and then the Euros final last year, if England had built a bit more momentum over this last year, I think England would have been one of the favourites going into this tournament. And I think on the back of the Euros probably would have been. So it's a shame that England don't quite have the same level of confidence or momentum going into it. But at the end of the day, the World Cup's here now. The players are there. Gareth's picked his squad. So all the players can do is get on that pitch now, build that team spirit, and try and sort of rekindle a little bit of rhythm that they had at the Euros. And it's a tournament at the end of the day. The players are going to be inspired. It's a World Cup. I think, yeah, it doesn't matter now. No excuses. Just go out there, perform, and England should consider themselves one of the big teams. As much as they're not going in with a brilliant amount of confidence. And yes, okay, questionably there might be the questions about maybe the fact England might have had a slightly easier run in the last two tournaments, but England have done enough over the last 4 years to suggest they can beat anyone on their day. And now it's time to prove it. Semi-finals, final, it's time to make that next step. And Yeah, this is the time is now for England if they want it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Nelson. I think, I'm actually all of a sudden feeling quite hyped, and not just because we're speaking about England in the tournament. I just think, despite the momentum, I think that the lack of hype going into 2018 was understandable because, in 2016 we had that horror show against Iceland. A lot of people questioned Southgate's manager, and I did as well, because, obviously the only time I've ever seen Southgate manage was at Middlesbrough, albeit that was a long time ago. I wasn't too confident going into 2018 for that reason. And I think that to get to a semi-final was brilliant. It was a massive breath of fresh air for an England fan, having what felt like a positive tournament, to be honest. And we kind of came out of that tournament thinking that was actually great. I mean, yeah, we got knocked out, but to finish fourth place it felt like so much progress for England from where we were a couple of years before. And
Sure.
even the Euros, the Euros was not a home tournament, but every game bar one was at home. And that one game that wasn't at home was against Ukraine. So really, we had a big home advantage in that tournament. And I felt the Italy game was such a big missed opportunity. But again, it felt like progress for England. It felt like we did really well. We got to a final, which I don't think many of us in our life, barely anyone in their lifetime can say that. I mean, it was our first final since we won the tournament, the World Cup in 1966. So not many people can say they've ever seen England in a final, never mind at Wembley. So it was an incredible thing, England getting there. But this tournament, though, I think a lot of people have mentioned the climate, Nelson, as well, actually, going into the tournament, which I think is a fair point. I think maybe South American countries might have a bit of an advantage there. I mean, I don't think it matters too much, but someone made the point that when the tournament seems to be not in Europe, Brazil do well, which actually is not a bad point. I mean, they didn't win South Africa, of course. They lost in the quarterfinals to Netherlands that year, but you've got to
Semi-finals
factor that in.
2014.
You've got to factor that in, and I think we're going to speak about other countries now, just for a few moments before we finish. And Brazil, I mean, the talent these have got on show. I was just joining a few friends before this on another podcast, and I mean, Vinicius Junior. This for me could be the tournament. I mean, obviously, Nelson, we've had the pleasure of watching Vinicius live a couple of times this year with living in Madrid, and for me, he reminded a bit of comparisons with Mbappe from 2018. A young, hungry talent. I mean, Vinicius is a bit older than Mbappe was, but a young, hungry talent. And for me, Vinicius, he could take this tournament by storm, and he could even outshine Neymar for me in this Brazil team. And if he does that and he captures some red hot form, I think he could end as a Golden Boot winner.
Wow. I mean, to be honest, absolutely. I mean, Vinicius, what an absolutely outstanding talent he is. I mean, and now he's proving it. He's proven it over the last couple of years at Real Madrid with his goal record. His assists, his end products it's just skyrocketed, and it's brilliant to see. And obviously, as a Liverpool fan, it was a shame he had to score the winner against us in the final last tournament. But I'll forgive him for that. I'll forgive him for that now. Given when we went to the Bernabeu to see the game against Shakhtar, he was just sensational. And yeah, that's what I love to see. I love to see those players who've all got those raw materials and are now. In the space of a couple of years, he's gone from quite a sort of, maybe people saying he's quite a profligate striker, missing a lot of, winger, missing a lot of chances. But now he's got everything. He's got everything. He's got the pace, he's got the speed, he's got the skills, he's got the finishing. I think, yeah, he could be one of the players of the tournament for sure. I mean, if he plays anything like he's played for Real Madrid, he's going to have a good tournament. And the way he's playing, he's got to be a starter in that Brazil squad. And it'll be interesting to see what sort of relationship he has with Neymar on the pitch. I've not watched a huge amount of Brazil's sort of games internationally, so that'll be interesting to see how Chichi, the coach, sort of accommodates them both in the team. But I think he's going to have a fantastic tournament, and that attacking contingent Brazil squad, like France, are just going to be a joy to watch, I think.
Well, I think Neymar's a big fan of Vinicius Junior. From what I've heard, he's been talking quite a lot recently, especially about the Ballon d'Or. And I think Neymar actually said Vinicius should have been higher than what he was in the rankings. So I think, I think Vinicius obviously has got the ratings of a lot of people right now. But we say this about Brazil, a lot of attacking talent, yes, but they've got to work together as a unit. And I think if they can do that, then, yeah, the rest of the tournament are in big trouble. But we've seen previously, we're not just with Brazil, but with many, many teams over the years, that a lot of attacking talent doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go far in the tournament. So I think Brazil have got to be mindful of that. But for me, then, Nelson, I mentioned this to you earlier, for me, another South American team is Argentina. And for me, in my opinion, Argentina have got a lot of momentum going into this tournament. They've got a
Oh, they
lot of
have. They
momentum, and I
have.
think that Messi is last World Cup, and I feel like the heartbreak of 2014. I feel like 2018 Argentina went in a bit of a state, didn't they? A lot of people were, I don't think they were really working as a unit. Obviously, they got beat by Croatia convincingly. They drew with Iceland as well, and I think despite having the likes of Aguero, Messi, obviously Di Maria, Higuain, and players like that, they just never seemed to gel Argentina back then as a unit. As I mentioned about Brazil, they never seemed to gel as a unit, did they? And I feel like that was the downfall. But this tournament, they're going in with so much momentum. And I personally think Messi's going to get his fairy tale endings. I just think they're going
Yeah.
to be so motivated, Argentina, to win this tournament for Messi. And the players who are going to run up, because obviously Messi's pressing game isn't as good as what it once was. So I think the rest of the Argentinian team, they've got a real workhorse midfield. I just think all evidence for me is pointing at an Argentina tournament win. I generally think Messi's going to get his fairy tale ending.
You know what? I think I'm in the same boat again. To be perfectly honest, I mean, having won the Copa America last year, Argentina having beaten Brazil. I mean, not only just to win the Copa America, but to beat their biggest rival, biggest South American rivals. The boost that gives them, and not only that, they've built on it as well. They're unbeaten in goodness knows how many games, over 30 games, and I think the transformation of that Argentina team has been absolutely unbelievable. I mean, I remember watching their 2018 games against Croatia in the group stage. I don't think it's unfair to say they were an absolute shambles. I mean, how lopsided that team was. You mentioned the sort of wealth of attacking riches they had, and yet how poor they were defensively. And yet now I think they've got a really good balance in the team. They've got Emiliano Martinez, obviously who plays for Aston Villa as their goalkeeper. Like you say, a workman sort of midfield. I think they've got a lot of excellent players all over the pitch. And not only that, they're coming together as a team, and that added motivation of Messi perhaps replicating Maradona and winning the World Cup for Argentina. I mean, it does feel like Argentina are the favourites, and I wouldn't back against it. And I think is it FIFA who have predicted Argentina to win, and
They
they
have.
haven't got that wrong in, I can't remember how many. I think they've got the last two right, haven't they? So I think
Yeah.
Argentina are going to have a very, very good tournament, and it could well be Messi's fairy tale international ending.
Well, we mentioned about that, don't we, Nelson? Actually, earlier on, ironically, I was actually on with a fan on a different podcast who predicted Belgium to win the tournament. So a bit of a stark contrast to what I predicted Belgium to do this year. So,
oh yeah, we're touching on that, Sam, at all
of
in this
course,
podcast.
for all these people who are going to watch this video or are watching right now, I think it's for me, Belgium. I personally think it's the end of this golden generation now. I mean, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's Belgium's last chance, and it is Belgium's last chance in a way. But for me, I just don't see this Belgium team. I just don't see this Belgium. I can see this Belgium team being the one that just implodes, and I can just see them not clicking, albeit they have got Kevin De Bruyne, who is one of the best players in the world, in my opinion. And I mentioned Thibaut Courtois earlier on as well. But however, Thibaut Courtois has not kept a clean sheet this season for Real Madrid. It's an amazing stat. I mean, obviously, they brought in the Ukrainian goalkeeper for a few games, and they did keep one or two clean sheets against Leipzig, Getafe, and Elche. So I don't think he's really got a lot of momentum going into the tournament. And I mean, I could be completely wrong, and Belgium could go all the way or really far at least. So,
but where did you put them in the group, Sam? Let's let everyone know.
I mean, I actually think Belgium finished bottom of their group, which is an amazing. I mean, if it happens, then I mean, wow. I mean, yeah.
I mean, to everyone watching, I was perhaps as sort of bamboozled as you are as to Sam's prediction. I mean, yes, they might not do as well, but I'm thinking, you look at that Belgium team, and yes, I don't think they're going to win it. I think they will be far from winning it. They might only get 16 or quarterfinals, but that group I think is very, very winnable. Croatia aren't the team they were in 2018. I think have arguably gone backwards. Mandzukic and a few others have retired. Some of the good players like Perisic, obviously Modric is kind of ageless, or at least the way he seems to play at the moment. But they're all getting on a bit, so I think it's still a very winnable group for Belgium on paper. I'm not expecting amazing things from them. I think it's very unlikely they'll get to the semi-finals, but I would think at least last 16 and likely quarterfinals. So to pick them bottom is a big surprise for me.
Yeah, no, I think it is a big shock, but I think you've got to put a shock in there somewhere. So for me, I am saying
got to put some money on it now, Sam.
Belgium will be that team, I think, who just don't have a good tournament. I think when I say don't have a good tournament for some teams like France, I still think France will get out their group, but I just don't think France might not go as far as what people expect. And I think that the champions retaining rate is terrible. I mean, I
It
think the
is.
last three champions have been knocked out in the group stage. I think
Oh yeah, I think so poor.
every team since 2000, other than Brazil, 2002, has been knocked out. I think Brazil got to the quarterfinals in 2006, but France got knocked out in 2002 after winning it in 98. And then Italy got knocked out in the group stage, in an easy group as well, for that matter, in 2010, a group that had New Zealand in it, and they finished bottom. So,
Blimey.
big things can happen. And then 2014, of course, Spain. I think that was the end of that Spain golden generation, though. I think that Spain
Yeah,
team
it was.
was getting on at that point. So I feel
Yeah,
they
it
just
was
kind of
declining.
burnt out. They burnt out a little bit, didn't they? Which, to be fair, Spain can probably be forgiven. They'd win 3 tournaments in a row. So
Yeah,
I think they can be forgiven. And then, of course, obviously
2018,
2018 was
Germany.
Germany. Again, another group where they just collapsed. I mean, Mexico game, they were poor. And I think the trap they
Oh,
fell into, Germany, in that tournament was keeping too much faith in the 2014 team without
yep,
realizing that football, it moves on in 4 years. 4 years
it
is a
does.
long time in football.
It does.
And
Because I remember, was it Leroy Sané wasn't even chosen in that squad? I think that
yeah,
absolutely shocked
and
everyone.
that was the year Man City got 100 points as well
Yeah,
in that season. So, and Sonny was a big part of that team. So to not take a player of that talent and still pick the likes of, I mean, I think Marco Reus was at that tournament actually, or was he? I mean, he could.
yes, I think you might be right.
I think that was the only tournament he's actually played in. Riggs, he's injured again going into this year as well. So unfortunately, Royce hasn't had much luck over the years when it comes to tournaments. But again, I think that was the guilty, and I think France, they're still too strong for me to not get through the group. But it can
Hmm.
happen. They could easily
Yep.
implode. I mean, we've seen France in the past implode,
Yeah.
so it can easily happen. But I'm just so excited now, as I feel like obviously weird time of year and stuff, but even us, Nelson, going to experience the Spanish atmosphere as well in Spain's capital, Madrid. I really can't wait to see Spain versus Germany in particular, because Madrid's obviously a very international place, and I feel like Germany is one of them countries where a lot of German people do live here in Spain. So I'm
Sure.
interested to see what that's going to be like and just how seriously Spain take this, because obviously, Spain fans have been quite spoiled, especially the ones who were like quite a bit older, because obviously they would have experienced 2008, 10, and 12 when they won, the 2 Euros and a World Cup. But the youngest generation of Spanish fans might not have really remembered that, or might not have really seen it as much. So for Spain, I think it's going to be great to see them. However, I don't think Spain are going to do too well personally. I don't want to say that, but I just don't think. I think Spain have got a team for the future, but I don't think this Spain team is built for right now.
Yep. Again, completely in the same boat. I think they're really lacking in certain positions. I think you can always bank on Spain's midfield. I mean, the wealth of options they have in midfield is pretty insane, to be perfectly honest. I mean, even the likes of Gavi and Pedri. Some people might question why they're in there, given how young they are, but they're starters. They're starters for Barcelona. So I think you have to pick them. But some of the choices he's made, Luis Enrique, picking Ansu Fati and Pablo Sarabia, who have hardly played at all this season. Sarabia, because he's just not going to get in that PSG front line. Ansu Fati, who has obviously had his injury problems the last couple of years with Barcelona. It's a strange one for me. And they lack a number 9. I mean, as much as Morata has had his moments over the years in Italy, Spain, maybe, obviously it didn't really work for him at all in England, but they're just missing that spearhead. And yeah, I think they'll get out the group, but I'm thinking, they could even go out in the last 16, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one, Nelson. It's a very, very good point. Now, we are going to wrap up in a few moments. But before we do that, though, obviously you mentioned, Nelson, about the World Cup schedule, how it's always hectic. The group stage, there's about 3 games a day, 4 games a day sometimes, and it can be very hard really to keep up with. Do you think in this tournament as well? Obviously, it's a weird time of year for a lot of people, but I think the tournament as a whole, for me, what for me is the most exciting thing about this year's World Cup, though, despite obviously all the negatives for it, is I don't remember a World Cup being this unpredictable. It sounds a bit of a, clear, it's World Cup's coming up. Everyone's going to say, oh, it's unpredictable. But I feel like there's a lot of World Cups you go into, and you kind of have a good feeling of who's going to win. And yeah, you might say if Argentina or Brazil go on and win the tournament, people will say, oh, it was quite predictable. We all thought they were going to win the tournament. However, despite the great teams of Argentina, Brazil right now, who are looking brilliant, I'm still not convinced they're going to win the tournament. I'm still having to talk myself into it. I still think there's teams who could spring an upset. And for me, with the opportunity, this could be the year of the underdog for me. I think this could be a year where an not wins it necessarily, but goes to the. I mean, Croatia were underdogs in 2018, so you can argue the last World Cup was kind of that as well. But for me, this could be a year where an underdog steps up and says, this could be our tournament, and you just never know because it only takes one day a team to be off their game, and that one win could give that team the world of confidence. So you just never know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think the fact it's it's in winter as well. What kind of dynamic that's going to bring, or at least the European winter. It's coming right at the sort of not necessarily the heart of the European sort of league season, domestic European kind of season, but that's going to add a interesting dynamic as well. So there are teams that, yes, give them 6 months, maybe in even England's place, you'd think could be in a better place. So teams that maybe have built on recent sort of momentum and things like that are going to have a better chance. But I'm with you. I think and also depends on the players. How fresh are they going to be? Having many of the European teams, they will have already played around sort of 20 games already this season, and not much time to recover and to sort of settle into the rhythm of their national teams. So I think it's very interesting. And obviously we talked about underdogs, and I think we spoke about this earlier, but who knows? I mean, I think Denmark could go further than anyone sort of expects. So, and if there was to be an underdog that wins the tournament, obviously we'd love it if England could win. But I mean, what a story that would be, and what a joy perhaps that would be when this tournament has been shrouded with so much criticism.
I think a question I'm going to ask about Denmark as well is an interesting one, as you just mentioned. Obviously, it's a long time ago now, but do you actually think that they might still be a little bit united from that Euros? Because I know they did really well after what happened to Ericsson. Obviously, a very sensitive subject, but after what happened, they did really well to recover themselves and still go on, obviously, and get to the semi-finals. But do you think that the togetherness Denmark got from that tournament and the momentum they've gathered post-Euros, do you feel like in this tournament, they might be a team who just take that momentum and carry it on? And you think Denmark as well, they've obviously won the Euros in 1992, 30 years ago. So do you think that maybe Denmark could be a team who've maybe got that little bit of a story, a reason to have a story?
For sure, absolutely. And I think the fact they went so far to the semi-finals, without Ericsson, their star man, many people, including ourselves, will probably look at that Denmark team. And yes, we'll know, you've Kasper Schmeichel, Højbjerg, a few of the sort of players. But generally, Ericsson's always going to be the star player for how he's delivered, even now with Manchester United, but Tottenham, Inter Milan, he's always going to be their standout player. And he's going to be back. He's going to be in that team, offering another different dimension. And generally, they're one of those teams that I think is really well drilled. They've got a good selection of players in all different positions. Obviously, they'll have lots of confidence. It's a shame for them the way the semi-final against England went, and they'll probably think they were very unlucky, with certain decisions or the way the sort of game panned out. But I think they've got a great chance, to be perfectly honest. And given France are in their group, let's say they win that group, and I think we've both made the prediction that Denmark are going to top that group because we don't quite think France are the well-oiled machine that maybe some people think, or perhaps they will come to be. But if they can build some confidence and get a win over France and top that group, who knows what kind of platform that would give them in the knockout stages.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think we've nearly been on air now for 1 hour, so we will wrap up any moment now. But I think, obviously, I'm planning on doing these live streams pretty much every evening of the World Cup, to be fair, if I can, or at least every couple of evenings to obviously speak about the events that are going on. And obviously I mentioned the group stage is always interesting, the group stage, because there's so many games to follow and stuff, but it does kind of calm down a bit when it gets to the knockouts. So obviously the first game is on Sunday, Qatar v Ecuador. We'll give our score predictions now. Obviously I won't be able to do a live stream on Sunday night because I'll be coming back from Granada, from the south of Spain. It's a tough life, everyone.
Exciting trip for you to southern Spain.
It's a tough life, everyone, having to do a weekend trip to Granada. It's a tough life. But yeah, obviously, Qatar v Ecuador, not the most mouth-watering opening game, but I'm actually very excited because it's the first game of the World Cup. It's actually a game that, as much as I'm thinking Ecuador will win, for some reason I can see Qatar turning up and just playing the game of their life and just because they're going to be thinking Qatar, if we're going to get any points in this group, it's going to be this game. So if they can turn up and just put in the performance of the best performance they've ever done, but despite that, I still don't think even if they do that, they're going to get anything. So
No.
I'm going to go for a 2-0 to Ecuador. I think they'll manage the game quite well. I think they'll score about 25 minutes, maybe ride the early storm from Qatar where they're coming at them and maybe putting them under a bit of pressure.
The desert
I
sandstorm.
can't believe I'm saying that about Qatar coming forward and putting teams under pressure, but I do think Ecuador's though. I think they'll nick a goal, and that might kind of suck the life out of the crowd. And then I think that Ecuador, will go and get a second quite late. I think Ecuador will start the tournament with a 2-0 win.
Okay. Well, I think from my point of view, and I was thinking earlier on, I think it's going to be a bit more comprehensive than that, to be perfectly honest. I think, like you say, Qatar will, to an extent, will probably be buoyed on by their home fans, but I just can't see it. I just can't see the pedigree. I can't see where their form is coming from. I can't see how they're gonna challenge any team. To be perfectly honest, I can't see them challenging Ecuador. So I'm gonna go. But there is one point in me with that home crowd that you never know that might just suck the ball into the net. So actually, I'm gonna go for a 4-1 Ecuador win to begin the tournament. That's my prediction.
I think if Qatar score, they should wildly celebrate, to be honest, because I don't really think they're going to have much more reason to celebrate in the other two games. And, that's the opening game. Also, England playing the second game of the tournament against Iran. Cannot wait for that game now. I'm really excited. I'll be watching it live in Madrid. So interested to watch England in a different country at a tournament, albeit I did that in 2018 in Tenerife. But to be living in a different country and doing it, it's going to be a different experience. So cannot wait. We'll give a score prediction on that later on in the week. And cannot wait for the World Cup to start now. But thank you very much for joining me this evening anyway, Nelson. It's been a pleasure
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
Great chatting about all things World Cup 2022. Obviously, really enjoying the Football League campaign so far. But I think the World Cup for me is the biggest football tournament. Well, in football, of course, it's the World Cup, isn't it? I think people grow up about winning the World Cup, I'm pretty sure. I mean, unfortunate for players like Erling Haaland and, who aren't really from a country who have the biggest, maybe the biggest stature in Norway, but
we haven't even qualified.
Yeah.
Think about Mo Salah, for example, Mohamed Salah. Yeah. So there are sadly quite a few players who won't be there.
It's a real shame because it'd be great to see all the world stars, but you can't know which country you come from, unfortunately. So some players Salah, of course, was at 2018, albeit very briefly with Egypt, but it's going to be interesting. And I just cannot wait. I just cannot wait for the World Cup now. I've kind of been hit with a bit of World Cup fever. So let's hope that,
I think we all will be by the end of the week.
Yes, and of course, keeping a close eye on all the games. But again, thank you very much for joining me, Nelson. And I'm sure we'll be back with more live streams soon enough.
I look forward to coming back.